Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Hey, y'all.
If you've got a tip for Melissa, a crime you've got a lead on, a case you want to know more about, how to eat that 2-year-old beef jerky without needing dental work, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. We just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host. She's got Dr. Henry Lee's phone number on speed dial and the restraining order to prove it, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell? Oh my gosh, if I only had Dr. Henry Lee's number on speed dial, he would have absolutely filed, some sort of a protection order against me, I'm quite sure.
I actually think he would have gotten to like you quite a bit.
I don't know.
Why don't you try?
Sure.
Why don't you just see what you can do and see what happens?
All right, now I got a plan. That's good.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Right.
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of his work.
I know.
Doesn't mean, he still wouldn't get an order of protection out against me.
Oh, well, we'll see.
And speaking of that, did you hear that zip?
Yeah.
It's a hoodie. I'm not disrobing in the podcast room. It's a hoodie.
Damn. So, listen.
I'm here alone with stuffed unicorns and skulls. No one's going to see. I have some decorated skulls and some stuffed unicorns in my podcast room, and no one's going to see me.
I love that noise.
Yeah. It's my snow leopard print juicy. I almost called it juicy couture hoodie. Anywho, speaking of filing an order of protection, I am going to file an order of protection on behalf of our bed.
Why is that?
Because you're a bed rapist.
What?
I can no longer keep this secret. You are a bed rapist. You rape our bed every night.
I do not.
And the way I'm going to explain this is, I, like most people in the universe, thought that the word rape only meant a sexual assault. The word rape is actually an ancient, archaic word, and they used it to mean many things. Robbery, kidnapping. There's a word where raisins are raped, grapes are raped and turned into raisins, like, suck the lifeblood out of them. And honestly, I wouldn't have known there was an alternate definition, even according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, until a friend who was into musicals was singing something from the Fantastics. And I really was...
This is so bizarre.
I know, I'm going in many directions, but you're going to have to hang with me. So she was very, very into musicals. And I'm at her house one day, and she's walking around going, "There's going to be a rape tonight." I don't know that it's exactly that tune, but I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And then she explains it's from the Fantastics, the Broadway musical. And it's apparently talking about a young girl that's being fake kidnapped so that the love of her life can rescue her and look like a hero. So you rape our bed every night. I got up this morning and was like, what happened here? Now, there wasn't like a large pile of blood, but what there was a sheet and a quilt that were so badly mangled and thrown off of the bed, thrown off the bed.
No.
Yes. Your side of the bed. I don't know what I must have been in a coma, and the dogs must have woken you up early, but you raped our bed. I mean, it's just literally called a rape at this point.
It's whatever it is. I plead temporary insanity because I did it in my sleep.
So the first definition of rape, according to Merriam-Webster, unlawful sexual activity, a sexual assault. Number 2, an outrageous violation. Number 3, an act or instance of robbing or despoiling or carrying away a person by force. Now, you despoiled our bed. Faux show. You threw the covers in such a way, I'm not sure they can ever be put back on the bed correctly and tucked in.
I just took a nap in the bed.
You're a rapist.
I am not a rapist.
You're a bed rapist.
You should not be using that word so lightly,
I'm not using it lightly. It's extremely serious what you do to our bed.
Well, I've never been called a rapist before.
A bed rapist.
That even sounds worse.
Well, it does make it seem like you're sexually assaulting an inanimate object. I'm not saying that, but you are absolutely violating it and despoiling it, because our bed, I'm not sure, will ever be put back. I mean, you did some damage, bed rapist.
Listen, I dream heavily. I probably move around in my REM.
Okay. Well, you know what? That's however you want to validate it to yourself. Moving around violently in your REM. God bless you in your, rapid eye movement level of sleep. So now that I've gotten that off of my chest, and I'm on behalf of our bed, I'm filing an order of protection against you.
I'm so glad to know that.
Yeah, you're probably gonna have to sleep in the guest room. You can rape that one all you want. I don't care.
Next.
Okay, so the next thing, I know this is all. It's gonna feel like we're going on a trip around the world. So besides complaining about my husband, producer Mark, and his bizarre sleeping patterns that tear up everything, and he's the ruiner of everything. That's a quote from Tanya, from Tipster Tanya, the ruiner of everything. That's Mark Humphreys. So the next thing is, before we get to the actual, it's going to be probably a 3-part series. This is about the grim sleeper, Lonnie Franklin Jr. I hate to even say his name and give him any sort of credit, which is not credit, but to even say his name out loud, because it's the names of his victims are the ones that should be shouted from the rooftops, because he is still alive, one of those people you don't ever wish were born. So not to give him any sort of leeway, because we don't really know a whole lot about his childhood, his past, and I'm still in my head, probably till the day I die, going to be arguing nature versus nurture. Probably going to be arguing that. I feel like maybe some people with a psychopath gene can be loved out of their psychopathy, but maybe they can't. And obviously, Lonnie Franklin Jr. didn't receive what he should have received as a child, I'm guessing. But I can tell you, people that are interested in true crime, I feel like they fall into largely a category of compassionate, empathetic human beings. I'm sure there's a group of them that are, curious because they're odd or strange, like odd, strange things. Maybe there's even a small group interested in true crime and forensics, etc., that are, just straight up sociopaths or psychopaths. But I can tell you that I have had a love of true crime and things macabre from childhood. I loved vampires from a very young age. There was a local independent, it's now a Fox channel, I guess, but when I was a kid, it was Channel 19. It was the local Cincinnati channel that would run, horror movie
you're like your local independent channel.
Absolutely. And they had the cool ghoul, who was sort of like a vampire but wore like Burberry plaid. Like a Sherlock Holmes deerstalker hat. I didn't really get the cool ghoul, but he had black under his eyes.
Oh,
sort of like a ghoulish,
like a ghoul, kind
of. But like a red wig, and it was very strange. Anyway, I loved vampires, and I was, pretty fascinated by things I shouldn't have been at a young age. And one thing I have seen as I've joined some weird ass Facebook groups is that a lot of us interested in true crime, maybe it's just my age group, people in my age group, started their introduction was with the book Helter Skelter. And the book was fascinating in that it had, pictures, and I only got the paperback copy, like I'm sure several years after the hardback was printed, but I got the paperback copy. And the pictures included in the middle were black and white, but they were, for the 70s, late 70s, they tried to be respectful. So the way the bodies were laid out as the police drove up to Cielo Drive were like whited out, but you could still see Stephen Parent laying outside his car from his prom night. I mean, it was like, it didn't help that the pictures of the bodies were like whited out or blacked out. You could still see the outline of the body perfectly.
In some ways, those things make them worse.
They do.
They leave so much to the imagination.
It's very creepy, even though they're trying to be respectful. So this long, bizarre introduction is not to shame working mothers, because my mother was a hardworking. She divorced my father when I was very young, and she was a hardworking single mother. My grandmother was a hardworking woman. She didn't really start work outside the house till my mother was, grown, but she still worked, very late in life, every day at the office. And I, needed a babysitter. So I had a wonderful series of babysitters and a couple of clinkers in there. And you don't know that you're getting a clinker, when it's the, early mid 70s, and you don't know, who's watching your kid. You think it's a good person. And I had a wonderful babysitter, and then she moved and she recommended her neighbor. And my mom would take me to her name was at the time Mrs. Campbell, when I knew her as a very young child. And that husband, she was a widow. Her second husband, I don't know what happened. I don't know what her maiden name was and what her first married name was, but her second married name was Mrs. Campbell. And her husband had been dead for a long time. And she got married again. And then I'm a kid and I can't remember all the names, but she was then Mrs. Warren. And I would mess up a lot and not remember that her name was Mrs. Warren and call her Mrs. Campbell. But, that was fine. I just remember her being very tall, statuesque, had a whole lot of very pretty black or salt and pepper hair, styled nicely, modest clothes, kind of like, uber religious, like long skirts. She always wore skirts, sensible shoes, blah, blah, blah. The things an older woman would do. And the thing I remember being, why these details stick out, but she had, she would grow rhubarb along the side of her driveway, which probably is where she buried the body. So the rhubarb grew really plentiful, but she loved rhubarb and would make rhubarb pies. I'm not kidding. I know she had an adult daughter who lived out of state and a grown son who was in the military. So she was by herself in this, you know how old ladies' houses are. A lot of floral couches and, old wood pieces of furniture and a certain creepy smell. So I would go occasionally to Mrs. Campbell / Mrs. Warren's home if there was, a snow day or an in-service day, because I would have been home by myself. My grandmother was working. My grandfather was a long-distance truck driver. And my mom was working. So I would go to Mrs. Warren's house. I remember it mostly being in the winter. So it was probably during certain, Christmas breaks or something where no one was going to be home. And she would tell me these stories that were always under the auspices of a cautionary tale. So now you can say to your kid, don't talk to strangers. You can, I understand now with modern parenting, you're given much better tools as opposed to don't talk to strangers. They'll hurt you. You say, so what would you say if someone came up to you and said, get in my car? Here's a safe word. If someone's going to pick you up after school, they have to know the word pineapple, or you don't get in their car. They're not a friend or family member, blah, blah, blah. So Mrs. Warren didn't have those tools. And, she had grown kids and was a, kind of a known babysitter. And she told me in relation to going down to her basement and seeing her piano, which was, an interesting, piano. And I would plink around on the keys and she would say, oh, it really needs to be tuned. And I would be like, oh, yeah, I don't know what that means. I'm 8. I don't know. And she would say, oh, I have a story about that. And I was like, okay. Now the details are really odd now that I'm an adult. It's one of those things where you look back and you go, how the fuck did I survive? How am I here? This is okay. So Mrs. Warren said that here's why I should never talk to strangers or get in a car with strangers. A young girl that she, knew, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's always a story, 7 people twice removed, whatever. So a young girl she knew got into a car with a strange man. He kept her for 3 or 4 days and sent, I'm sorry, I'm going to tell you this and Mark is going to divorce me right away. sent notes to her parents, like ransom notes, like send me $10,000 and I'll give you your daughter back. And ironically, the daughter was about my age and had long dark hair like I did. Weird, huh? So that was one of the details I remember. So he had already killed her, and I don't know why. Of course, I'm 8. I'm not thinking, why. But to make it seem like that she was still alive, he sat her up in the passenger seat of his car and used, don't ask me why, piano wire to hold her eyelids open and drive her by her parents' house so they could see her looking like she was alive.
Wait. How old were you when she's telling you this?
Like 8.
There is a deep temptation right now to say, well, that explains. But
That's what I'm saying.
I'm not going there.
That's what I'm saying. First of all, here's my mindset. You could see into the body of the piano if you lifted up the lid. I'm not sure I'm using the correct words, but I thought, now how did he get the wires off of there? I can actually hear myself thinking that and probably asking her, and her brain, I don't know, like a wire cutter. So anyway, now as an adult, the only thing I can compare it to is Malcolm McDowell in A Clockwork Orange, but I think that was Forks. So anyway, this rapist killer, and I'm not even sure she said the child was raped because I don't know if I would have known what that meant. And I just, all I remember is the little girl's eyelids were held open with piano wire. And then I'm thinking, so did he pull it back and use a barrette? Like to affix it to her hair. I'm literally thinking logistics. I'm trying to figure out how.
8 years old.
I'm 8.
And
I'm wondering
you're
how.
Thinking about, well, now how would they go about
How
would they go about doing this to
Why would you use piano wire?
Young dead child who looks exactly like me?
Yes. I'm thinking, how does he do, why would he use piano wire, and how did he do it? Was it like a headband? Did he take the wire, haul her eyelids up, and then, put a headband on? I mean, that's the stuff I'm thinking. Now, obviously, in today's world, you would just have them hold up a newspaper for proof of life. You didn't have to use piano wire. It's much easier nowadays with...
You didn't really back then either. I think
just kidding.
I think Mrs. Warren was just being very creative in her storytelling.
Yes, she was either extremely creative or she was really sick, but she never raped or murdered me. So I don't know if I just wasn't her type or...
It does make the question, where was Mr. Warren during? Was he at work?
Under the rhubarb. I don't know. There were many Mr. Campbell and Mr. Warren. I don't know what her original names were. But maybe the second story will solidify for you that these were cautionary tales. So as I said, I remember it being mostly during the cold weather months and that I would stay with her. And she had a little pond in her backyard. It was on Skyway Drive, not far, not right off Taylor Mill. And her pond was frozen over, but not, there were parts you could see that were not frozen over completely. So that leads to another cautionary tale for Mrs. Warren. 2 young boys were staying home, brothers, let's say 10 and 11, staying home from school during a snow day, and their mother was at work, and she said, whatever you do, don't go ice skating. Don't go ice skating.
Oh, my God.
And the boys go ice skating, and the ice is not completely frozen solid, and one of them falls through the ice, and his brother tries hard to save him and pull him out, but he doesn't, so he dies under the ice, and then he has to call his mom at work and say, please come home, I've killed my brother. So now I'm an only child, so I didn't worry about the brother thing. But literally, I remember thinking to myself, do you think he could see? Do you think he's under the ice and he's looking up fuck it, Dave, I'm right here. Can you give me a hand? Those are the things I'm thinking.
So even back then, you were very analytical.
I really think I came into this world analyzing shit. I do think I remember thinking, I wonder if you can see through the ice if you're under it. I wonder how long it takes if you're really cold. Do you feel like pain if you're really, really cold, or is that, a way to go, where you just kind of, you feel it warm and then you have hypothermia and then you die. I don't know. So anyway, those are the things I would have done. discuss
I
before.
think I'm gonna go to the store.
I think you should go to the store.
I need to go. I need to do the thing.
I need some piano wire for our
boy.
piano.
Oh,
I don't even know how that. Why would she say that? I mean, I don't think she was a bad woman. I really don't. I think she was different. She was a little off or something. But, I never, of course, told these things to my mom until I was older. And I just remember her sitting there with her mouth open like, what have I done? And, my mom was just this hardworking woman looking for a decent, babysitter for her child. And now there's, nanny cams with audio. So you could hear if Mrs. Warren is telling your child that dudes pick you up in their car and hold your eyelids open when you're
Nowadays,
dead.
that mom would just program your iPhone to record everything everywhere you went. Right.
And then like a SWAT team descends on your roof and takes the kid out. And yeah, it's a little different. It's a little different now than it was then. But I'm not saying that Lonnie Franklin Jr. had a bad experience with a babysitter, but you never know. The reason I say that is because we don't really know a whole lot about his childhood and his life. But Lonnie Franklin was a California boy born and raised. He was born in South Central LA in August of 1952. He lived there his whole life. He has been married a couple of times. He's still alive. He's on death row in San Quentin for many decades worth of horror that he wrought in the LA area. He is sort of given the gift of timing in that when he came into his own and changed and evolved in his method was a time in Los Angeles when there was in the 80s, mid to late 80s, a lot of a cocaine problem where people were dying of overdoses. There were several serial killers operating in Los Angeles at the time. And he benefited from hiding, I think, under those things for a while. But like my favorite beautiful phrase from Lao Tzu, there are three things that can never be hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. And the truth comes out, and the truth came out in the form of DNA on some motherfucking pizza. On some cheese from a pizza, Lonnie Franklin. So Lonnie Franklin is an LA native. He was married his first wife was a drug addict, divorced her. Second wife gave him an STD, so he divorced her. Now he's still married to his third wife. Do not ask me how Sylvia Franklin stands by her husband, but he is still married to his wife.
Wow.
I know. 30-something years. Number 3. Don't understand. So he joined the Army probably right after high school. And this is another thing I do not understand. He was given a general discharge. Now, a general discharge, I guess, doesn't say dishonorable or medical.
Or honorable.
Or honorable for sure, because he was never given an honorable discharge because he was linked to a gang rape when he was in Germany. So I don't know if they didn't prove that he, did anything, or if he was just named as part of the group, but he, was given a general discharge. He has 2 sons. One son ends up being his downfall because his son, Christopher, was arrested on assault and auto theft charges, and eventually with felonies, his DNA was put in the system. And that's how they caught Lonnie. But before we get there, we're going to go back. And Lonnie was 32, oddly, similar aged that the Golden State Killer was when he started. Now, it's an odd thing to bring race into this, but it has to be mentioned because it's kind of a big component. 80% or more of serial killers are white males. They're obviously Hispanic, Asian, other nationalities for sure, Native American, but a small group of serial killers are black men and women. Those are very small groups. And it's said that when white male serial killers are arrested, they sing like mynah birds. And when black male serial killers are arrested, they won't give you their middle name. They say nothing. And Lonnie Franklin really held true to that stereotype. He, to this day, it's not a mountain of evidence against him. It is a mountain range of evidence against him. He still will never admit to anything that he's done. And we're talking exact ballistic results from a gun in his possession. Over 1,000 pictures and videos of naked, maybe asleep, maybe unconscious, or maybe dead women, some of them alive with their eyes open. There is a video camera he set up on the sly in his own home to videotape him videotaping a young girl. It's the most disturbing thing because it's so not disturbing. He is not the guy you would ever think would do any of this. He is the least guy you would think who would do this. He didn't fall into any of the typical serial killer parameters. He was not a loner. He was a gregarious, outgoing guy. He could be quiet, but he was friendly to people in the neighborhood, always willing to help, would fix people's cars for $20 in the neighborhood, lived in a really lovely mint green house in South Central. He and his wife owned a really lovely house, really beautiful architecture. He, held jobs. That's become a little bit more in a clearer picture of him now, because he absolutely worked the system in a really awful way and is still continuing to work the system, but had jobs, was in the military, worked for the sanitation department for a short period of time, repaired cars for the LAPD, right under their noses.
Wow, that's convenient, huh?
Yeah, they knew when they were going to arrest him after the DNA results that this was going to be a pretty big, embarrassing arrest for the city, because his work had been attributed to several other people, including a sheriff's deputy who was dirty. I mean, Ricky Ross, let's just call him what he was, which sounds like the name of a rap producer. But Ricky Ross was a really dirty sheriff's deputy, and he actually spent a couple of years in jail because he had a similar caliber weapon that all of these women were ending up in alleyways and dumpsters, just being tossed out of cars randomly in really bad areas of town near liquor stores and swap meets and bail bondsmen. He, this LAPD Sheriff's Department narcotics officer is pulled over in a very large, kind of a pimp mobile, and because he's weaving, and there's a prostitute with him, and he's an off-duty narcotics officer for the Sheriff's Department. He and the prostitute were smoking crack. He had a .25 caliber unregistered pistol in his trunk of his car. So he spent some time in jail saying, I didn't do any of this. I don't know what you're talking about. And like I said, Lonnie Franklin really kind of benefited from the timing of his attacks. So starting in 1985 through 1988, he murdered 7 women. And I believe what happened in 1988 gave him pause, and he stopped for a while. But unlike the name given to him by a fantastic author, the name The Grim Sleeper, he was originally called the South Side Slayer when they didn't know who he was. He was actually given a couple of other serial killer names. But Christine Pelisek is a fantastic kind of gritty journalist who worked for, I think it's kind of defunct now, except for maybe its online presence, the LA Weekly. And if you lived in Los Angeles, if you were of any age under 60, you saw LA Weeklies in carriers around the city, like right next to the LA Times. And the LA Weekly was a large paper magazine, and it was great. It was probably based on, do you remember the name of the one in New York, producer Mark?
Yeah, the Village Voice.
The Village Voice, thank you.
Yeah, it was a free paper. You could get it for free. They didn't charge
Absolutely.
you for it. It was actually how they made their money was on, very intimate personal ads that appeared in the back of the paper. But
That is true.
Had great journalism.
It did. Some of the most amazing journalists and some of the most amazing stories I have read in my 27 years in Los Angeles came from the LA Weekly. And there are some really good publications in this town, a lot of good writers. But the LA Weekly seemed to attract people who maybe didn't want to write for traditional news outlets, wanted a little more leeway, and they got it. But they lived up to journalistic standards that you would find in like Vanity Fair or the New York Times. They were just really great journalists. So Christine Pelisek is that girl. And she was a crime reporter. When you work for the LA Weekly, you probably have to have several gigs because you're not going to make all your money on the LA Weekly. So she did, I think, crime reporting for other outlets, maybe other news wires. And she writes. I've been trying to find the way to describe her writing because it's so different and unique for a woman. And that, I don't want that to sound sexist, but it's clear-headed and organic and authentic, but it's really not flowery or poetic. It's just what it is. She just kind of reports the facts, ma'am. And she does a really good job. But every now and then she'll drop a diamond, and one of the diamonds that she dropped was the name, The Grim Sleeper. Christine Pelisek, the author of the book, The Grim Sleeper, that came out of her series of 4 months of investigative journalism for the LA Weekly entitled The Grim Sleeper. She named him that because this woman, this journalist, found a connection that the LAPD could not. And granted, the LAPD is working on a zillion cases, and a journalist who's obsessed with one case is working on one. I get it. But it's still, they have access to much more information than she does. And because she had befriended people who worked in the LA County Coroner's office, she had more access than most journalists to what was happening, when, and why, and how. So a series of 7 women are found between the years of 1985 and 1988, and they have been murdered and disposed of in the most awful way. Some of them are under mattresses in alleyways. Some of them are heaved into dumpsters and found anyway. Some of them are rolled up in rugs and blankets and left, but found anyway. And they're all killed the same way, up close, personal, and with a .25 caliber, pocket pistol is what they call it. And no one's really connecting this. And you always hear the same thing, that some serial killers find the disenfranchised, find sex workers or people that he thinks will not be missed. But he really made a lot of mistakes. And even though it took a long time to catch him, he found himself with victims that had people that loved them very much. It didn't matter what they did for a living. It didn't matter if they had an addiction problem. It didn't matter if they were sex workers or had no jobs. Some of these women were walking to the store to buy food for an elderly parent or their own children. And he would find them and somehow coerce them into his car and talk to them kindly and then kill them or attempt to kill them. Part of the reason that he probably knew how to dispose of these bodies was his years of working for the sanitation department. Part of the reason they don't believe that after 1988 and before 2002, when he definitively struck again, that he really was the Grim Sleeper and took a sleep? Is that because he had access to and knew of alleyways, disposal schedules, city parameters? He knew not to go out of, his jurisdiction, so that police agencies may say, hey, I've got a serial killer here. And, he knew his area, that the LAPD was overworked. There would be many gunshot victims. He knew enough to make his system work for a while. So at the age of 32, he begins, and he kills 7 women in a 3-year time span. 7 that we know of for sure. Could be more. He is now, after his arrest and prosecution, is linked to 16 more women. So that's a total of 26. But on the lapdonline.org/grimsleeper, you can find the pictures of the unidentified women. Like I said, 1,000 pictures and videos were found in the walls of his garage upon his arrest.
Yeah, that's the thing that just really creeps me out.
Some of the women came forward and said, that's me. I remember him. He took my picture. He wasn't bad to me. He let me go, whatever. Some of them said, I'm alive. Some of them have been identified by family members. That is my family member. They've identified quite a few. Now, there are still 2, number 117 and number 171 on the LAPD website, that they're really hoping someone can identify. They're both of the women appear to have their eyes closed, so we don't know if they are dead or if they are just unconscious. But if you have any idea of anyone that's missing, please take a look at the LAPD website and see the pictures, because they're not disrespectful pictures. They've probably taken and cropped the pictures that he took, and to keep things from being more uncomfortable than they already are. But it's a fascinating thing. And one of the things that tripped him up was that one of his victims survived, and she was able to identify him. Now, several women who had bad experiences during the late 80s, even these women that were sex workers, said there was this strange dude in an orange Pinto. Now, girls, just don't get into an orange Pinto.
Really? I was going to say, well, that right there is kind of a tip-off.
I think so, too. I get it. Maybe you're tired, your feet hurt, you're walking home from the store with, heavy bags. But if a guy comes up, and the description of him is always the same: clean cut, geeky, nerd, polo shirt with a collar, tucked into khakis. The description's always the same. That guy in an orange Pinto that one of the women describes looking like a Hot Wheels because it has stripes, racing stripes.
Oh, and racing stripes too?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Don't get into an orange Pinto. I don't know what cars are safe to get into, probably only your own, but an orange Pinto. So several of the women said, I was walking home. One of them had, this was pretty fascinating. She begs off, no, I'm good. I don't need a ride. Are you sure you don't need a ride? No, really, I'm fine. I'm good. That's what's wrong with you black women. No one can talk to you.
Oh.
And she said, okay. Because women always want to please, because women feel guilty if they've hurt someone's feelings. And she gets in the car. Now she lives, but, it's not a good thing.
So did she get shot?
She did. But she lived. I don't know how, except that she had a bigger purpose in life, and she stepped up to the plate and did an amazing job. So this is a weird place to start, but it's one of the things that bothers me greatly. And I'm going to start with this little tidbit about Lonnie Franklin before we get into the other couple of episodes it's going to take to cover this story. He filed for disability after he got his job with the city of Los Angeles as a sanitation worker. He said he had a shoulder injury. So now he is arrested, and one of the lead detectives is a terrific guy. He's retired now, but Detective Dennis Kilcoyne, really smart and did a great job of interrogating Lonnie Franklin, who wouldn't budge an inch. Told him very surface things. One of the things he said was, I hurt my shoulder on the job. I think it's called IOD, injury on duty. And, I never pursued a claim. Well, that was a lie. He pursued a claim, and he will continue to get a paycheck until his death.
Even when he's on death row?
Yep.
Oh, my God.
Yep. He will continue to get a check. So after 9 years of service to the city, he retires on retirement disability at the age of 36. And when he first filed in 1991, he was getting $900 a week. And now he's getting $900 a month. And now he's getting over $1,700 a month, still getting it. And if he lives to 82, he'll get $3,000 a month if he lives to 82.
I just don't understand that.
No, I know. It's a way bigger discussion about the city of Los Angeles, about the state of California, and I'm sure we're not the only city and state that does this, but there's no programs in place that if you get arrested for anything, including a felony, and are on death row, that stops your payments from the city.
Well, if you're convicted. I mean,
nope.
Honest to God, this says something about how public unions are run. I mean, whether you think public unions are good or bad, that's something that's got to be, I can't believe that. Yeah. Don't you think? So he gets approval for his retirement, his disability retirement. And ironically, the day that he gets his approval, he's arrested. He has his 11-year-old son next to him, and he is arrested. Apparently, he made lots of, side money working on cars for the neighbors. Like I said, everyone on the block knew Lonnie, nice guy Lonnie. He actually was sort of his lot was on a corner, 81st Street. And everyone knew him because, hey, Lonnie, my car's broken. And he would do like major overhauls and charge people $20. I don't know if it was because he had, other money, or I don't know. But he, like I said, nice guy Lonnie. So on November 5th of 1991, the day that he gets approved for disability retirement from it's called LACERS, Los Angeles City Employees Retirement System. From the Retirement Board of LACERS, he's approved for lifelong checks on November 5th. And he and his 11-year-old son are driving around, and he's arrested for grand theft of a red Toyota and a 1991 Jeep Wrangler that were found in his garage. Now, the Wrangler is partially stripped, and that is a task that would require a lot of upper body strength, i.e. non-shoulder injury work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So even though he's arrested on the day that he is given lifelong disability retirement checks, that's not going to stop. That doesn't stop.
So he was originally arrested for grand theft auto?
He had a pretty lengthy record for much smaller things like assault, receiving stolen property. He was known sort of around the town, around the area, for selling stolen cars.
I see.
So I think that's how he kind of, made extra dough. So, yeah, he was good with cars, probably knew how to find cars, lift cars, and strip them and resell them. So he had an extensive arrest record before he started working for the city of LA. I don't understand that. The only thing I can say is that I know that we're talking about the 80s.
I'm sorry.
I don't know. Okay. I can't explain it. But he was arrested for several smaller things. I mean, not small, but small in comparison to multiple murder. He was arrested for receiving stolen goods and assault. He had those 2 arrests before he started working for the city of LA. I don't understand how it happens. But we do know that, one of his victims weighed like 165 pounds, and she wasn't just thrown out of his car or kicked out of his car like a lot of the women were. She was put in a commercial garbage bin in an alley of near 94th and Western. A lot of these women were dumped along Western Avenue, which is a long, very long avenue. But these women weren't just like, a couple of them were kicked out of his car, just kicked out of his car. But he also did, he would lay them in an alley and pose them with their legs spread apart in an effort to really demean them. But some of them were really badly beaten, strangled, and heaved into high places where you would need upper body strength. The woman who survives, Anitra Washington, said, and this is 1988, she's like, he did not have a shoulder injury. And he claimed the shoulder injury from 1983. So she was like, he had no injuries. He beat me with the strength of 1,000 men. So here is Lonnie Franklin Jr., who is living his life and is a real monster. And according to the LAPD, the Sheriff's Department, and the Inglewood Police, who actually had to all come together to work on this after the connection is made by Christine Pelisek, the journalist, to fucking finally get him. They have to work together to get him. And they all agree, in the city as big as Los Angeles and the state as large as California, he's still going to be one of the most prolific serial killers that we have ever seen. And the next 2 episodes, I think, are going to be interesting and awful at the same time. And I really can't say enough about maybe taking a gander at The Grim Sleeper, the book by Christine Pelisek. There's terrific information in the LA Weekly online. You can find it. It's a really fascinating story, and we'll continue it next week. And more cowbell.
And remember, if you've got a tip for Melissa, give her a call at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837. Or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. Melissa, would you like a 4-cheese pizza? I'm sorry, that always gets me.